Well, I've had a couple guys asking for an update on the 2072 project, so here's just a short one for you guys. As you can see, she's mostly back together and running, and this old Onan purrs like a kitten now. I've said it before, I'll say it again, this is one of the smoothest running Onan engines I've ever had. And it sounds 10 times better now that that stupid freeze plug on the end of the camshaft isn't rattling around. So I started the project back in mid-November and just finally got it back together and running under its own power this week. I did have the engine running a couple weeks ago without the driveline hooked up, just so I could get it hot enough to retorque the cylinder heads and just kind of check for leaks and whatnot. But I've been running it for probably 2 hours now, and it runs smooth as a Swiss watch and it doesn't leak a drop. So with just 1,050 hours on it, this Onan engine's ready for another 35 years of service. And you know, with proper maintenance, you know, regular oil changes and keeping the fins clean, there's no reason this thing shouldn't make it to 3,000 hours. So just to recap, I pulled the engine out originally to rebuild the starter because it was just getting too weak to the point where it wouldn't even turn over. $20 with an eBay brush kit, and using my special made brush fork tool from a couple years ago, I just cleaned up the inside of the starter, changed out the brushes and springs, and put some grease in the brush cup, put it all back together, and the starter works better than new now. It's cheaper and easier to do than, you know, going with one of the cheap aftermarket starters from eBay, because those don't last half as long, if they even last. I've had some that were bad right out of the box, so I figure it's not worth the hassle, especially when you consider what all is involved in pulling one of these engines out and changing the starter. So I rebuilt the starter, tore into it, and learned that the cam bearings were shot. Replaced the cam bearings as well. I replaced every gasket and every seal. Had the cylinder head shaved at the local machine shop and replaced with new gaskets and new grade 8 bolts since the old ones were stretched. New front and rear main crankshaft seals. Decarboned all the heads and the valve intake and exhaust ports as well, because those had some carbon buildup on them. I replaced the fuel coil assembly in the back of the PTO clutch there because the windings were coming apart on the old one. Maybe someday when I have the time and patience, I'll learn to, or teach myself to rewind the old coil, because I still have it. I've just kind of put it in my parts bin for now. And the parts for the Onan engines in these tractors aren't getting any easier to find. I also had to replace the fuel pump because in the process of putting everything back together, I broke this fitting off of the original one, and of course it's plastic, so I had to get a good used fuel pump off of a 420 John Deere. New points of condenser, all new fuel lines, and I also replaced the shutoff valve in the bottom of the tank, but of course in the process of putting the new one in, it didn't work right. Now the I guess the stopper inside is bent up, so it leaks fuel, so I got to replace that again. Luckily that's not too hard to do. It's not a major leak, but it's definitely not something I want to let go. I also rebuilt the oil pump and cleaned the oil sludge out of the pan when I had it apart, and I made sure to install a new oil filter adapter seal gasket, or shroud gasket, whatever you want to call it. This is a very overlooked and very important piece of these Onan engines and keeping them cool. Early in the life of these engines, a lot of these get taken off to do an oil or filter change, and they just get discarded and never get put back on. So if you want to keep your engine running cool and you want to keep all of that intake air directed, you know, across the cylinder heads, you have to have this piece there and intact. Also with that, I replaced the foam insulation that goes between the engine and the firewall to keep any debris out, and just kind of went over it, cleaned everything up, and you know, addressed anything that could cause problems down the road. I replaced the gas cap as well. New steering wheel center cap, the correct one for a 72 series. New key switch, so now I have functioning headlights and taillights. I didn't before. As far as the drive line's concerned, I flushed the hydro and the rear end out, got all the sludge out of the rear end when I put the 3-point hitch on it. So I cleaned it all out, put some fresh HyTran in it with a new filter, and while I was at it, while I had the drive line out, I also replaced the input seal on the charge pump, since those tend to leak, and the only way to get to them is to pull the engine forward, pull the drive line out, and then take the charge pump off. So while I had the engine out, it only made sense. I got it back together and got it running and realized that the relief valves on top of the hydro there were leaking pretty good. So I took those out, shipped them out to MachTech out in Ohio, had them rebuilt. And I also had them rebuild the valves in the 782 as well, because the 782 was actually leaking a lot worse. There was a pretty good puddle of oil under it, and it would just start shooting the oil out as soon as you fire it up. So MachTech rebuilt all 4 valves for me, had a very quick turnaround, and it was a very good, very reasonably priced. I highly recommend his services if you have one of these leaking. It's cheaper to get them rebuilt than it is to buy new, so definitely recommend them. I also replaced the seat that was on it with the correct Cub Cadet or Case IH B94342 seat. There was nothing wrong with the original seat. It really wasn't even that old, but I wanted something that would have been factory correct. And in my opinion, this style of seat is a little bit more cushy. It's a little more comfortable, and I think it just looks better. And when you work at a Case IH dealer, of course, you know, you want to go with the right parts. So it only made sense. I have a cover coming for it as well, so it'll match that tractor there. Covers good cheap insurance against the torn up seat. Also shout out to Jeff, who lives right up the road from me here, who I just met the other night. He came to buy the old seat off this tractor, and he quickly realized that he had seen my YouTube videos and he had been watching my channel. So Jeff, if you're watching this, shout out. A couple little things to fix on it yet. I have to replace this tail light bulb, and whoever had this before me, or before Levi, I guess, had the bright idea to max out this top link and then just weld it all solid. So that top link is basically fixed now, and you can see how it's all out of whack. So I'm going to see if maybe I can, you know, take it apart, cut the welds apart, and put it on a lathe and fix it. Because these Cub Cadet top links are not getting any easier to find, and they're kind of unique because they have the 5/8 inch ball up top and then a 1/2 inch ball down here. That's kind of goofy, but so that's on the list for the future if I start using this for 3-point work. I also got a drawbar for it. I'm going to put a hitch ball on there so I can move my trailer around the yard. Adjusted the power steering, tightened it up a little bit, so now it shouldn't wander left and right when I'm going down the road with it. Got a new Deka absorbed glass mat battery, the same one that I had in my 882 diesel. It's the only decent battery that fits under the under the seat of one of these tractors, and it's a Mazda Miata battery. It's a deep cycle battery. Those are very, very important, I should say. I got sick of eating up lawn and garden batteries in these tractors because you can't put a big car battery under the seat. I put one in the 782 as well, so now I shouldn't have any issues cold starting them. So at this point, all that's left to do is replace that leaking fuel valve, get the rest of the sheet metal put back on it, and then this weekend I'm going to bring up the 50-inch mower deck and the mule drive from my parents' house back in New Jersey, and we'll get this thing dialed in and ready to start mowing grass. Never thought I'd need a super garden tractor to mow grass on a 1/4 acre, but I guess you can never have too much machine for the job, right? Anyways, just a quick update for you guys. Looking forward to making more videos with this tractor, and hopefully with any luck getting it out to more shows this summer. So we look forward to that, and thanks for watching, guys.